Hey people, it's ScionVyse here, and the 2010s were a great decade for video games, I'd say in general. Sure, it gave way to some of the most malicious industry practices we've ever seen, but I think on the actual games side, it was really great. So I'd like to focus on that today and give you guys a list of my top 20 favorite games of the last 10 years. This list is pretty loosely ordered. I think like the top 10 are pretty solid, but everything past that is going to be kind of up in the air. Things could swap around at a moment's notice, that sort of thing. Just a few rules here before it gets started. There's going to be no re-releases, remakes, remasters, that sort of thing. And there's only going to be one title per franchise on this list. That's going to be important later on. But yeah, so you're not going to see multiple titles from a single franchise, you're not going to see any remasters or re-releases, that sort of thing. Anyways, that's all there is for rules, so let's get going. Okay, so before we really get started here, I have two quick honorable mentions. First is Tetris Effect. I feel like putting this in the top 20 would be cheating a little bit, since at the end of the day it's still just Tetris with one or two minor gameplay changes. So it's more of a new coat of paint on an old game rather than a completely brand new one. That being said, it is basically the best coat of paint a new game could ever get, so just the experience of playing Tetris Effect is almost enough to put it on this list. Second is Dragon Quest XI-S. This game is very quickly becoming an all-time favorite of mine. Really, the only reason it's not on this list is because I started playing it in the last week of 2019, and at this point I haven't finished it yet. If I had finished it before the end of the decade here, I guarantee it would be on here, maybe even breaking into the top 10. I love it that much. Alright, with that out of the way, here we go. We're going to be starting off this list with the quintessential looter shooter, Borderlands 2. Released in September 2012, Borderlands 2 quickly became a staple multiplayer game for me and my friends. We've played it through multiple times together, and it's hard to remember times that were just more fun. Borderlands 1 did the same and was a blast in its own right, but 2 just refined and improved on everything with a few small exceptions. It wasn't the perfect sequel, as I feel a bit of the atmosphere and tone was lost in transition that I personally really liked, but 2 made up for that with its humor, which was a riot back in 2012. Borderlands was a comedic western, whereas Borderlands 2 was a cartoon with sand, you know? All that said, I feel like the shift in tone only helped make multiplayer more fun, so I'm fine with it. I haven't played 3 yet, but if it's anything like 2, I am gonna have a great time. If this were a list based on playtime alone, 2013's Pokemon X would easily be number 2. I kinda fell out of love with the Pokemon games in the late 2000s, but when I picked up X, everything seemed to click into place in just the right way. This was my deep dive into Pokemon. I went from being someone who would just play the main story and move on, to fully completing the national dex, hunting for shinies, and building competitive teams. All in all, until the release of Gen 7, I put in over 600 hours into X, and I don't regret a single second of it. I don't really know what there is to say about Fire Emblem Awakening that hasn't already been said. It single-handedly saved the franchise from being prematurely retired, it skyrocketed the popularity of the franchise to the point that it received multiple big-budget games afterwards, for better or worse, and it introduced a bunch of mechanics that would go on to define the modern series. That wasn't by chance either. Awakening is a fantastic game and easily one of my favorite games in the turn-based strategy genre. I'm not sure if I would put 3 Houses here instead if I was making this list a year from now, but as of now, Awakening is the best Fire Emblem of the decade and one of my favorites. Sometimes you just have to enjoy some rootin' tootin', jumpin' and shootin'. At a glance, the thing that sets Cuphead apart is the aesthetic, the beautifully drawn cartoon sprite animation and swing and jazz soundtrack, but at the end of the day, it's also an incredibly fun run and gun game. Simple yet deep, challenging but fair, tight yet fluid, Cuphead is a game that is just a joy to play. And it's getting even better in 2020 with a full expansion called the Delicious Last Course, and I can't wait to jump in for more. "2017 was an incredible year for gaming, in no small part thanks to Persona 5. Compared to other games on this list, I probably have more problems with Persona 5 than any other, though. The pacing sucks, some of the characters are pretty boring, particularly all the villains after the first palace suck, and it does a particularly bad job of hiding its big twist. But its strengths definitely outweigh its negatives. The core gameplay is still really engaging, the majority of stories and characters are great, and stylistically it is unmatched. While I don't think it's as good as Persona 4 Golden, it's still a fantastic RPG, and hopefully it's only going to get better with Persona 5 Royal launching this April. The only game from 2019 on this list, Slay the Spire takes a lot of my favorite things, roguelites, character progression, turn-based combat, and deck building, blends them all together and makes something that is not only really unique, but incredibly addictive. Slay the Spire is one of the few games that I've grabbed in early access, and I'm so glad I did. The game has 3 characters with their own archetypes and deck possibilities, and they're working on a 4th. Each character is so vastly different and has so many different ways to play, so each run is going to be different from the last, and you can still build on previous knowledge to make decks that work better as you go. Oh, it's great. If you want some deck building RPG goodness while we're patiently waiting on Batten Kaitos 3, give Slay the Spire a try. It's no secret that I'm a fan of the Metroidvania genre, but 2017's Hollow Knight is a game that took time to grow on me. I'm glad I took the time to really dig into it though, even enough to want to make a whole video on it, because if I had only given it a passing glance, I would have missed out on one of the best in its class. Beautifully drawn and designed world with loads of exploration, big, challenging bosses, and nearly unlimited options for progression, Hollow Knight exemplifies what this genre has to offer, and is basically a must-play for lovers of Metroidvanias. Choosing which Mario game to include here was a bit of a struggle. 3D Land was fantastic, and Galaxy 2 was basically perfect for what it set out to do, but there's just something about the collectathon structure that draws me in more. Super Mario Odyssey is a return to open world exploration, unique and interesting places, and collecting lots and lots of MacGuffins. Yes, there are probably too many moons, which leads to a bit of repetition, but just running around and jumping is so fun that it has never really bothered me too much. That being said, Mario lacks Sunshine spin jumps, so Odyssey is actually garbage. 0 out of 10. Worst game. Now, I've already said how much I love the Metroidvania genre, so I'll skip that whole spiel and just say that Ori and the Blind Forest is my favorite Metroidvania this decade. While there are a few things that it skips out on, like combat, there is combat, but it's not a focus basically at all. Where Ori and the Blind Forest excels basically beyond any other is the movement. Once you get the abilities like Dash and Bash, moving from place to place is the fun of Ori. Bash in particular is arguably my favorite ability in the entire genre. It takes the idea of touching enemies, which is normally a bad thing, into a way to propel yourself further and faster. So you can get some movement that is just not possible in other games, and it feels incredible. The sequel is set to release in March 2020, just 1 week after Final Fantasy VII Remake. Oh no, I can't wait. It's probably my number 3 most anticipated game for 2020, and that's saying a lot considering how many games are slated for this year. Sometimes you just have to relax, you know? One of the games that has helped me relax throughout the years was Animal Crossing New Leaf. It's Animal Crossing, there really isn't too much to say about it more than that. It's Animal Crossing, and it's probably the best incarnation of the franchise to date. I've spent so much time just planting flowers, fishing, and just being a bud to the animals in my town. Just on its own, that's enough to be a game worth playing for years after the fact. But for some reason, 4 years after launch, New Leaf got a big expansion with Welcome Amiibo, which added new features, new minigames, new villagers, and a way to get your favorite animals in new towns with Amiibo cards. If New Horizons has even half the content of New Leaf, it's bound to be another game to play for years to come. Wait, that's releasing a week after Ori and the Will of the Wisps? Oh, what am I gonna do? So, of course this game was going to be on the list somewhere. It was really just a matter of where, and I think this is a good spot for it. I absolutely adored my time with Breath of the Wild. Just to put this out there, a lot of the issues that some other people have had with it, like weapon degradation and the lack of unique sprawling dungeons, didn't really bother me too much. For what Breath of the Wild is doing, I feel like both of these aspects were fine. I do think the weapons shouldn't break quite as frequently, and obviously having Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword tier dungeons would just put it over the top, but the way Breath of the Wild lets you explore like no other game, I can't really explain why, but I just love every second of it. I can't really explain why I like any given aspect of this game in this video, since even if I was just gonna say why I love the runes, that would take 5 to 10 minutes, so whatever, I just love this game. Oh, and the music was great too. I don't know why anyone would dislike it. It was great. For me, above anything else, what makes a good game worth experiencing is the gameplay. With that in mind, I'm putting Dishonored 2 over the original here. From a gameplay perspective, everything is just better. Adding Emily as a second playable character with her own unique abilities is fantastic, and keeping Corvo around for people who love the original is just adding icing onto the cake. The level design here is also astounding. Dishonored 2 has 2 of my favorite levels ever, being the Clockwork Mansion and a crack in the slab. The level design here is so intricate, so thoughtful, and so masterfully done that I've gone back to Dishonored 2 just to play those 2 levels. Now the story overall isn't as good, and the individual levels don't feel as connected in the world as things were in 1, but that's really all I can say that's bad about it. And not even bad, just not as good as the previous title. So all in all, Arcane knocked it out of the park with this one, and it's a shame to know that Dishonored is kind of on the back burner for the near future. Going from one immersive sim game to another, Deus Ex Human Revolution is here in the number 8 spot. Along with having top-notch stealth level design, which makes each area a puzzle as much as it is a location, Human Revolution did a lot to create a really well-designed world. The art direction here is incredible, the black and gold colorization is super striking and gives the game a really unique look and feel, and the gameplay is great too. It gives you a lot of freedom to do things in your own way. Multiple paths through areas, loads of options for problem solving, both violent and non-violent, and just really lets you be creative with things here. I go back and play this game so often because of how many different ways it can be played, and I love it each time. Shame about the ending though, it pulled the Mass Effect 3 ending almost a year earlier but got none of the fanfare. Of course a Smash Bros game was going to be on here, and of course it had to be Ultimate. Smash Bros has been a part of my life for over 20 years now, and I can't even say that about most of my friends. I just love playing it, man. Every update, every patch, every feature, it's still exciting to me. It's only been out for a year and I've already put 450 hours into it. I don't like playing as or against every character, but that doesn't really matter since for every character I dislike, there's 20 that I do like. I doubt anything like this will ever happen again, so I'm going to savor every moment of it. Now, this is a game that keeps on giving. A lot of my feelings towards Animal Crossing apply here. Stardew Valley is a great game for when you just need to relax and not worry about anything. But on top of that, add to the fact that Stardew has so many things to do aside from daily life and farming, and all of these activities are so deep that it's easy to get lost in whatever you're doing and stay that way for a very, very long time. The world and characters are so charming too, even people like Shane and George are likable eventually. If you ever feel like you just want to go buy a farm, move to Pelican Town instead, you won't regret it. We're breaking into the top 5 with a brain melter, the Talo Principle. Easily my favorite first-person puzzle game, the Talo Principle tests your mind not only with its puzzles, but with its philosophy. This game is about moving boxes, redirecting light, and opening gates, but it's also equally about the nature of life, belief, and intelligence. The puzzles themselves are great too, being quite varied and really using their ideas well. The add-on expansion, Road to Gehenna, is arguably better than the base game in a lot of ways, and is worth the price of entry wherever you want to play it, like on the new Switch port. Please just play this game. It deserves way more notoriety than it got, and it's an experience that is hard to find anywhere else. I'm a big fan of RPGs, and specifically I'm a big fan of Bethesda's RPGs. At least I used to be. Anyways, I really loved Fallout 3, but when Obsidian took a turn at making Fallout, they really cemented Fallout as one of my favorite franchises. 3 had a lot of restrictions, very little in terms of meaningful choices, very linear storyline, and very few options to break from that due to so many characters just being invincible all the time. New Vegas fixed these issues and turned everything up to 11. Choices matter and not only affect the main stories but people around you, there are many paths through the main story, and there's total freedom to do anything you wanted. It's a true role-playing game, and not only is it one of the best this decade, but one of the best ever. Of course, this is based on the PC version, which does have a lot of mods which improve the experience, from bug fixes to visual enhancements, etc. How I generally enjoyed the game nowadays is with the fantastic Tale of Two Wastelands mod, which combines Fallout 3 and New Vegas into one game, using all of the gameplay enhancements that New Vegas included. If you have both of these games, this is, in my opinion, the definitive way to play them. But even with this, I'm always looking forward to the New Vegas content way more than the Fallout 3 stuff. And of course, I am much more likely to go back and just play New Vegas on its own than go through Fallout 3 first. Who would have thought that a little Flash game by Edmund McMillan would end up being such a huge project? Flash Isaac didn't really click with me, so picking up Rebirth in 2014 was definitely a gamble. But oh man, did it ever pay off. I didn't just play Isaac, I lived it. I did everything there was to do. Then when their Afterbirth DLC released, I did it again. And when Afterbirth Plus released, I almost did it again. As of now, I've got all but 2 achievements and a total of over 900 hours in this game. That's just PC too. I also own the game on PS4, Wii U, and Switch. There is so much to do and unlock in this game, it's incredible. And it's just going to get bigger too, with Repentance, a DLC based on the fantastic Anti-Birth mod, which I also played the heck out of, by the way, releasing sometime in 2020, hopefully. Will I pass the 1,000 hour mark? Yes. How much above that? I have no idea. Yeah, this one is a bit of a hot take. I know what everyone's gonna say about this. Blasphemy, Kazul, but hear me out. Being honest, this spot was basically a coin flip between Dark Souls and its sequel. Dark Souls has a much better designed world, being very interconnected like a big spider web, whereas 2's world is more like a series of tree branches. Dark Souls also has more interesting lore with more nuance and better designed bosses. Dark Souls 2, on the other hand, feels like a more fully realized game. The gameplay is more fluid, more robust, and designed to give the player nearly unlimited options. You want to dual-wield weapons? You can do that, and if you meet certain stat requirements, you can even get a special moveset for your trouble. So, if you wield 2 different weapons, you get 5 movesets just out of that, which is unrivaled for the series. This versatility in the classic Souls gameplay just speaks out to me so much that it offsets a lot of 2's flaws. 2 also feels more complete than the original. There aren't any areas in 2 that feel obviously unfinished or rushed like Lost Izalith does, which is another plus. But at the end of the day, I had to choose the game here that is more fun, the game that I'll go back to more into the future, and that is Dark Souls 2. And here we are at number 1. Can you guess what it is? Well, before we get into that, I'd just like to say thank you. I started making videos about 10 years ago, and sure, I disappeared for almost half of that, but I'm still thankful for anyone who's sticking around and still watching my stuff after all of that. And I hope to continue making more into the future, so let's hope that this next decade is a little bit more active than the last one. Anyways, on to number 1, my favorite game of the decade. Xenoblade Chronicles is not only my favorite game this decade, it's my favorite game, period. I love everything about this game. The story is great, the characters are lovable and relatable, especially Shulk. The world is one of the most creative and awe-inspiring I've ever seen. The music is just jamming all of the time. And the combat is probably my second favorite RPG combat system, period, only behind the later Grandia games and just barely. I don't want to say too much right now since I'm planning on doing a full series of videos on this franchise, but what I will say is that this game is a 100-hour epic, yet I still try to find the time to go back as often as I can, because it's just that good. And while some people may not have been as excited, the announcement of a remaster launching in 2020 is hands down my favorite announcement of 2019 for games. Like, ugh. Not only because I'll get to play it again, but due to the Switch's popularity and Shulk's inclusion in Smash Bros, many more people will get to play it as well. Oh, I love this game so much. Like, heading out onto the Bionis' knee for the first time and seeing the Mechonis is something I'll never forget. And that's only a few hours in. I'm gonna start rambling here, so I'll just leave it at that. Xenoblade Chronicles, my favorite game ever. So there they are, my top 20 favorite games of the last decade. Do any of my choices match yours? I'd love to hear them in the comments. So with that, I think I'm going to sign off for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all later.